Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining. But the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. Welcome to the Agritourist Podcast. This is your host, Jen Ross. Today we are speaking with Margaret Moulton, Executive Director at Berkshire Grown. Berkshire Grown, based in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, works towards an equitable and resilient local food system by supporting and promoting farmers, connecting people to local food, and building community partnerships around local food security. Margaret and I explore the impact of Berkshire Grown on the community and how the organization, its members, and its partners demonstrated, especially during COVID, the need of relying on regional food sources and that you actually can rely on those regional food sources. Many foods can be sourced locally, and being conscious of what is growing during the current season is very important in order to support local farmers and the local economy. Margaret's grant writing background has significantly contributed to her success in her executive director role at Berkshire Grown. She mines for federal, state, regional, and local grant opportunities in order for Berkshire Grown to properly and effectively serve the needs of the local community. Projects like their mobile farmers markets, which reach into underserved communities, is a growing model of how Berkshire Grown is meeting the needs of its farmers and the community surrounding these farmers. Enjoy my conversation with Margaret Moulton, and we hope you get inspired to shop your local farmers market or farm stand on a weekly basis.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am very good. Thank you. So you were at the Bean Festival
Yes.
that I had attended. What'd you think of it?
I loved it. I think it's they did a really great job. You know, they're trying to spread more of a message than just growing beans. I mean, honestly, at that scale, I don't think they can make much money as bean farmers. But they're really promoting the message of, what it means to build a resilient little local food system and talk about growing locally and feeding your community. They did some really fun educational things. Also, the way they grow. So they're very careful about how they treat their soil and rebuilding the soil. And that's a high priority for them. So, it was an educational event as much as a celebration.
It definitely was. It was. It was very impactful. Were you able to stay for the tasting? Did you taste?
No, I didn't stay for the tasting. I probably should have reorganized. I had a certain amount of time. I was like doing my own day-long chores, and I sort of allotted, okay, I have this much time. And I went to the first part. I should have gone to the second part.
It was, they were delicious. I love beans, but I have to say and I'm not just saying this, they were some of the best beans I've ever tasted. And it was also the way they cooked them. They had cooked them in the ground, and it was just really, the whole day was just very, for me, it was impactful on many levels. And just being there, it was the first time I was actually in that area. So
yeah, I was wondering how you ended up there.
I was visiting a friend who actually has a place in Spencer, a farm in Spencer, Massachusetts, and he also has a place in Maine. It's actually a farmhouse. It's not an established farm. It used to be a farm. It's kind of on, if they call it the hill. It's right out of, I guess, I don't want to say downtown, but you know what I'm saying, the downtown area. I can't think of the name of the road. But he also has a place in Maine. So I went up to Maine to visit his place in Maine because he's looking for a farmer for his property up there. And then I was in Spencer the night before, and my friend Tim had mentioned this bean festival. So it was a whim because we were like, I was like, okay, I'm up here. I might as well go across. And I met my friend for lunch at the Berkshire Food Co-op.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, this is like a mini Whole Foods. It was like real, like authentic Whole Foods, not Amazon
Yeah.
Whole Foods. And I loved it. We were sitting outside. It was a beautiful day. They were playing music. I had this great sandwich. And then he's like, oh, why don't we walk through town? And I had never been to Great Barrington. And you couldn't see the town from where we were. So I kind of turned the corner and I'm like, oh my God, this is so nice. I've been to Kripalu, and I visited last summer. My Dory owns Berkshire Farm Sanctuary in Peru.
Oh yeah. But that's way up in the hill towns. Yeah.
So, well, for me, it's kind of all, you know, but yeah, so I had gone up there, but again, I didn't see everything. So Great Barrington was beautiful. We walked around and then I drove down to Sheffield and I was like, oh, this is just so nice. So come to find my friend moved from Long Island up there a year ago to Pittsfield. So I've been up there a few times now and exploring the areas and visiting. And I used your guide here to help
Oh,
me
nice.
locate places. The whole thing is marked up inside. Um, but yeah, so I have the podcast. So I really love the area and I felt a strong connection to the area. I've been there for Kripalu a few times, but again, never explored the
Yeah.
bigger area
Yeah.
and learning a lot. And my daughter may be she's graduating, my youngest is graduating this year and she plays basketball and she might be going to a school in Boston. So it's like 90% sure. So I'm like, it'd be nicer to be, I know it's not around the
Yeah.
corner, but it's closer than coming up from Long
Relatively
Island.
close. Yeah.
Coming up from Long Island, you have to take the ferry and then you have to drive and you deal with all the traffic and stuff. So at least you could go across state. I'll know when her games are. So that's basically what's happening is I really, the area really resonated for me. So I wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive and learn more. Um,
Yeah.
and I have a whole agriculture background. I used to have a farm, and I want to get back into farming in some capacity. I have a marketing and agriculture background. So I'm exploring just a lot of different options and just learning from people about what is farming like. Because I haven't had my farm in a few years. So obviously things have changed.
Yeah. What kind of farm and where were you?
In Center Reach, Long Island. So right by Stony Brook University. I don't know if you're familiar.
I do know that. I used to be familiar with the director at the museum there. He and I were friends from a different place where we worked together. So yeah.
So yeah, so if you take the Port Jeff ferry, if you take the Bridgeport to Port Jeff ferry, the farm was like 10 minutes from the ferry, south of the ferry. And it started out, the farm was a nonprofit that basically donated their food to food pantries. So that was their mission and that was their sole mission. Everything was organically grown. And I started volunteering there and just loved what they did and helped them put a farm stand together, helped them create a network of people, connected them to Stony Brook University and started working and doing programs with students and professors and stuff like that. They had a few acres at the back of the farm that they just couldn't afford to use and to start, to finish. So, and I leased that part of the property and, you know, got it to where it needed to be, worked with the main farmer there, and we developed a CSA. And we also had a mobile farm stand truck that
Oh,
we would
nice.
take to Stony Brook and on the university and several different locations. Actually, we would go to. We hooked up with some corporations and the school and the hospital and some different organizations wanted us to come. And between the CSA and the mobile farm stand truck, and also we did a lot of education at the farm and off the farm, especially with kids. And so those three pieces were the main source of income. The CSA, we didn't have anything around here. Most of the CSAs are located on the east end of Long Island. And so we also added a farm to table soup into our CSA for a quick meal for people. So we were playing around with different ways to appeal to customers and appeal to our target market, which is a little bit different than some of the East End target markets, and loved it. And we also had sunflowers. We did a lot of sunflowers. And
Oh, yeah.
honestly, I got to say that was the most lucrative part.
I know. I think, a lot of vegetable farmers grow cut flowers. It's a way, I think it serves many, many purposes. It is a good money maker. It also draws people to the stand.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we went to the hospital, we couldn't bring enough bouquets of sunflowers. And it wasn't
well,
for
of
people
course, yeah.
visiting people there. It was for employees because there were, there's thousands of, there's 20,000 employees at in the whole center there. And we couldn't even get them up the elevator banks. We would be selling them on the elevators going up to where the farmers market was. It was crazy. I was like, of all things, they're beautiful, don't get me wrong, but I'm just like,
yeah, I know. I'm here to sell food. Yeah, it's funny. We tried to get our mobile market. We had originally hoped to have it stationed outside. There's a perfect spot for it outside of one of the hospital buildings in Pittsfield. But they have, and I think this is hospital or health system imposed. It's not the town. They can't sell anything on the property.
Really?
So there's a coffee truck that comes and parks on the street. They can sell because they're on the street, but we can't do that because we have to go in and park and, have a safe place for people to get out and walk around. But, to the point that there used to be nurses who a rep would come in and sell them the gowns that they want. They can't even have that. It's a very odd policy. So that was a disappointment to us because I think that would have been a great site.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of rules.
Yeah.
There are a lot of rules. Every place had its own rules. I've looked for land here for years, but that's not a priority here where I live. I'm not out east. It's a little different, but it's far to get to. And I want access to a property if I'm going to be growing for many reasons. So it's just not the right area. And like I said, the priorities here it's more about building commercial and residential real estate, not about preserving land for farms.
Yeah. No, it's, land preservation and farmland access is a huge issue here too. We're not quite as developed as around Stony Brook, but we're not even close to that. But it's the same thing of, preserving good agricultural soil. Once it's been developed, it's done. All that topsoil is gone. It gets all kinds of other stuff in it. It's just gone. And in Massachusetts, it's a real concern right now. We're losing farmland faster than we can hold on to it, if that makes sense. Even if we stopped right now and said, okay, we're going to try and save X amount, we wouldn't be able to keep up with the loss. So I don't know what's going to happen. The state has a new farmland preservation commitment that they're really trying to pursue and see where that goes. But land is expensive.
Yep.
So,
do you feel? Well, tell me about your area, your specific county. Do you feel it's more of a priority where you are? Obviously, as you get closer to Boston, I can see, that access to the city and jobs and stuff like that.
I mean, you've experienced both realities of our county. So Berkshire County is on the border of Vermont, New York, and Connecticut. We're 2.5 hours out of New York City, 2.5 hours from Boston. We have a huge cultural, especially Southern Berkshires and Northern Berkshires to some extent have huge cultural personality in the summer season with Tanglewood and all of the museums. There's a lot of theater festivals in Pittsfield and the Southern Berkshires. And then, there's year round, there's Miraval, there's Canyon Ranch, there's Kripalu. There's a lot of activity that is very accessible to people who live in the big cities. And that's great. I mean, in terms of preserving the regional economy, that's amazing. What it does to property values is it also drives those up. Yeah. So I was at an event last night that was actually raising money so something that happens around here, and there are several community land trusts and other like Berkshire Natural Resources. There are groups who are doing something called buy, protect, sell. So they will find either from their own budget or find a donor who will buy land that's farmland that needs to be taken off the market from whatever use it is that's going to not be farmland, whether it's development or a gravel pit or solar field. They'll buy it, they'll protect it, and they'll hold it until a land trust can come in and purchase it. So there's a 80-acre parcel that was purchased a few years ago, 2 years ago, by a local donor. And the land trust has been fundraising in the interim to raise the money to buy that from her. So she basically is holding it. And they're on the last mile of fundraising. So last night was a sort of a last mile fundraiser concert. It was fun. But I was in conversation with somebody, just exactly what you're saying about land access. Like most farmers around here either live on land that they inherited, that their family's been farming for decades, for generations, or they farm it for a nonprofit, a land trust, a wealthy farm owner, or they lease it or just have a handshake agreement to use it for free. But very few farmers actually own their own land, come in and say, I'm going to buy this 40 acres and farm it. Because you can't, if you do that, then you have to have your own resources.
Yep.
So that's hard to do in an area where the property values, it's beautiful here. It's easy to say, oh yeah, I would like to have this land. A lot of I have people call, I would say monthly, at least I get a few calls, particularly in the spring and summer, where landowners will call me and say, oh, I have 10 acres of beautiful farmland that I would love to have somebody come and farm. And I'm like, okay, I'm happy to come and walk around with you. Let's talk about, does it have water? Does it have infrastructure? Are you willing to look at big, messy stuff all the time? Or if what you want is sheep grazing the field, there's the reality and there's the dream. And a lot, I've made a lot of interesting contacts with people, but I don't know that any of those visits have resulted in actual farmland use.
Interesting.
They just have it. People have an idea of what farming is. And then if you go, especially to a small, diversified vegetable farm, there's plastic all over, and there's, plastic bags full of rocks, and there's, a tractor over here and
it can be messy
hoses over there.
It's reality. Yes. So Margaret, tell me a little bit about you. You have a photography background, I saw.
You've done your research. Yes, I've worn a lot of hats in my life. I do have an MFA in photography and worked as a photojournalist for a while, and then went to graduate school. And when I graduated, I worked in museums, in museum education. I worked in a photography museum initially.
Okay.
So planning educational programs for grown-ups. So workshops, lectures, seminars with very famous photographers. We'd hire them to come in for a week. It was a lot of fun.
Where was this?
This was in San Francisco at the Ansel Adams Center in San Francisco.
Nice. Oh, nice.
Which no longer exists, actually. And that my husband and I then moved to Los Angeles for his job, and I did other freelance work. I'm a very good printer. So I can do, I worked as a printer for a while. I worked in a later, in 2008 and 2009, I worked at a high-end printing studio outside of New York City. that printed for museums and artists. And then that museum education planning experience, I worked at various other museums doing program planning and got a little bit into grant writing. So I left that museum to go be a printer, and then the economy crashed. So after a couple of years of doing that, then I started two parallel kind of freelance things. One was doing editorial photography, going back into photojournalism, and the other was grant writing. And that's what took off. So I did that for a few years, writing for our town and small foundations, little community center, things like that. Once again, then that kind of became a real job at another museum. And eventually, when our kids graduated from high school, I was like, this was all in Westchester County. So in a small river town close to the city, I was really done with that suburban life. I'm like, we need to get out of here. And my husband, who worked in publishing, was like, I can work anywhere. So we started looking north of, up into like Columbia County. We have friends who lived in Ghent, which is kind of near Hudson. We looked around there and then realized, okay, if we're going to make this move, it has to be a move away. Like, we're not going to be able to commute. He could go into the city, but I wasn't going to be able to commute down to the museum job I had. So I looked around and I got a job over here in the Berkshires working for the Trustees of Reservations, which is a land conservancy in the state of Massachusetts. Again, doing program planning. And that was wonderful. So that got us to the Berkshires. That was never our goal to be here, but it got us here. And it was lucky that we landed here. We landed in Great Barrington because for my work, for that job, I had to come down to town meeting, to a select board meeting to get some sort of permit. I can't remember what it was. And I remember sitting in the audience and I really liked like the back and forth. Everybody knew each other in the audience on the select board. They're speaking to each other very openly, following rules. And there's a guy who's clearly the head of the select board. And he's got this wild hair and he's wearing a denim shirt, but a blue blazer. And he's got Robert's Rules of Order right next to him. And I'm like, who is this? And it turns out he's a farmer, because when the farmer's market issue came up, he recused himself and left the room. And I thought, I want to live in this town. I want to live in the town where the farmer is on the select board. So we narrowed our focus to Great Barrington after that. So now I live and work here, and I ended up in Berkshire Grown because after the 2016, the first time Trump was elected, I thought, wow, I can't just plan these like games and outings and hikes for grown-ups. I need to do something that's going to have a more profound impact. So it took a couple of years, about 18 months, until I found what I wanted. And then I moved to Berkshire Grown in 2018.
They had been in existence, what I read, from 1985. So this was an established, or was it?
Yeah, no, it definitely was. I would say that we really started as what we are now in 2003 when they incorporated. It really did start in the 80s. It's very fuzzy to me what that was. Like, was it just conversations in those days? Were they doing much? They initially started out as a sort of a business to business networking idea. They really rode that farm to table wave of connecting farmers to chefs and restaurants. Like, the farmers around here, very few of them knew how to do that. So Berkshire Grown did that, but they don't need us to do that anymore. They had networking events. They did lots of things to support local restaurants who were supporting local farmers. Even when I got here, we were doing something called a harvest supper, an annual event in the fall where we'd have maybe 20 or 30 chefs come in and do tastes. It was at Butternut Ski Area in their lodge.
Okay.
And they had to use local ingredients. And so you would buy a ticket and you could go around and taste, and there was an auction, and it was a fun community event, but it began to fit. So I ran two of those, I think. It really began to feel to me like it was stressing out the restaurant owners. We would pay them their cost of ingredients, but they had to hire staff. It was just like it
Yeah.
was pre-pandemic, but it was beginning to touch those staffing issues that we really face now. So even pre-pandemic, we had decided to back burner that event for a while.
Okay.
Which people still say, "Oh, I love that harvest supper. When are you going to do that again?" I'm like, never.
Okay.
I would like to do things that connect people to farms and restaurants, but something that's a little bit more authentic. I'm not sure. We did a thing in 2018, 2019. We did something, it was called Lamb Jam, and it was on
Okay.
farm, and we had a local chef from the Prairie Whale came and spit roasted two lambs, and it was on the farm. He used all of the vegetables from the farm to create these amazing sides, and we made it very affordable. So it was really a friend raiser, not a fundraiser, and it was to get farmers and young people there as well as sort of our
Right.
donor base. And it was great. And I would do more of those kinds of things. But then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
And there were things, we already had a CSA program similar to what you described, where we were paying for CSAs from local farms about, I think it was about 18 farms at that time. We would buy the CSAs and they would deliver directly to food pantries. And maybe that was $25,000 in our budget, our annual budget. And it was a goal of mine right away and that was just during the regular summer season. Right away, I said, I want to make this year round on some level. So I fundraised another $7,000 or $8,000 to just buy some storage crops and some meat for specific pantries around here that I could get, those local farmers to deliver to. And that was great. And so then that was the end of 2019. 2020 was the pandemic, and someone called me, in the very beginning, there was a conversation around, what can we do? The schools are shut down. A lot of these families who were getting food boxes after school, that program is done. Food pantries were, had a lot of people coming in, and they were getting food from food banks, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not fresh. So someone said, "Margaret, you know a lot of farmers. What can you do?" And we just reached out to our CSA purchasing, our Share the Bounty program, and everyone's like, "Yeah, all my wholesale contracts are dead."
Yeah.
So we had, it was amazing. And this happened with everybody. People were sending us money. Local foundations made it really easy to apply and get money right away. You didn't have to wait 6 weeks. You would hear Berkshire United Way, you would hear within 3 days. So we and other organizations, this was not just us. This was a whole of organizations. We had all these meetings like everybody else. Just really pivoted. I hate that word now, but that's what we did. And all the farmers did that too. But it was quickly, it both served the farmer need and the food pantry need.
Right.
And that was great. And then it became really clear. I will never forget, I went to some large kind of countywide training about poverty. And there were people there from Health and Human Services and hospitals and schools. And somebody said, this need is not going to go away. It's going to get worse after the pandemic. And I thought, really? But you just had to look around for like 5 minutes and realize the wisdom in that. So that was the beginning of our farm to food access. It's like, okay, what can we do that supports farmers and makes a commitment that pantries can count on? They're not just getting, oh, you'll get a CSA, you won't know what's in it. it was the expectations were clear. And then so we started fundraising for that, and that was great. That was in 2022 and 2023 or 2021 and 2022. At the end of 22, we got some large government grants that were huge game changers. State grants that over the course, we've now gotten 2 of these state grants, local food purchasing awards, that over the course of 2.5 years, it's like $1 million that goes directly to farmers. The downside is there's no admin in it. So we have to fundraise for the money to pay our management, our staff to make the programs work.
Yep.
But all of that money we're spending $40,000 plus a month on local food. And then we work with partners who get that food out to the pantries. So I say Berkshire Grown gets the food to the table as crops, and our partners take it away as food. And that's the other thing. I'm sure you've heard this from other places, that the pandemic, one of the positive things is the community building that came out of it and has not just stuck, but really thrived, of partnerships between lots of organizations. Realizing that you can't do this on your own and you shouldn't do it on your own.
Yep.
So that's been really great too.
I have a question. So I just want to go back for a second. When you first were looking at opportunities personally, what was it about Berkshire Grown? Like what did you see in this organization, or the potential for this organization? And then I want you to fast forward to now about like what's happening with this organization and the potential. Like what is your like newer vision for it? Like what attracted you at first? Like what was it?
Well, I mean, Berkshire Grown's been around a long time, so I knew about it because they ran winter farmers markets. Randomly, my husband and I had volunteered for them at a couple of events, just, because we did. So it wasn't like I had never heard of them before. I knew, and because we both care about farms and farming and local food, we knew a lot of the farmers for whatever reason. Sometimes because their farm is a mile down the road, and sometimes from the market.
Did you come in as the executive director, or did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I came in as the executive director. And when I came in, there was myself and 2 staff. I think only one of those 2 was full-time.
Wow. Okay. So you've evolved things.
Yeah. So now we have myself, and at the moment we have 4. Everybody except for me works 32 hours a week. Technically, that's full-time, but I'm the only one who works 40 hours a week. But we do have 1 staff position, actually the mobile farmers market manager, that's open, that we'll start looking to fill after the holidays. And then we have a lot of seasonal market related positions that will come up. But so now it's me and 5 staff. We have a great team, but it's really changed. Like everything has changed. It's just not the same organization. Not to say that organization wasn't wonderful. I mean, they did really great things, but a lot of what they had done when I came in, I met with a couple of farmers when I was thinking about applying for the job. And I'm like, what has Berkshire Grown done for you? What could they do more of?
Yeah.
And one of the things that really stuck with me, and I think continues, although I don't put my finger on it all the time, is just really raising the profile of local food and farms and promoting them. There's really nobody else around that promotes them, like that. The publication that we have, or through our social media. There are other organizations that do amazing work with agriculture and don't not promote them, but it's not part of what they do. And that's part of what we do. And we promote our own winter farmers markets, but all the farmers markets. Like, you said you wanted to talk about, and I'm sure we'll get there, like agritourism, which I don't think a lot about. But then I thought, you know what? Actually, I do, because in the summer in particular, farmers markets, that's an element of agritourism.
Yes, it
That's
is.
something,
Absolutely.
from my experience, whenever we go on vacation, we look around for the local farmers markets. And so we really do promote them, whether or not it's our own uh, internally run market or not. We maintain the Berkshire Farmers Market website on the back of our website. So that's something that we do in a lot of different ways. We tie that more and more. So for me, looking forward, I think we're looking backward and looking forward. I think that spoken or unspoken, building and strengthening the local food system, whether it's connecting farmers to chefs or eaters, consumers to farmers and to restaurants sourcing locally. That's always been a concern. It's still a concern, but now it's also like, what about the people who aren't eating in restaurants? What about the ever-growing number of people who are accessing a lot of their food that they put on the table through a food pantry? It shouldn't just be dehydrated eggs and canned
Right.
tuna. So getting the local food has been a game changer for all of us. We have farmers who've scaled up their entire business in order to supply our food access programs. And that feels good to me. I mean, it scares me because what happens if we lose that funding? A lot of that's government funding. So we are always looking at how to, where else are we going to get those funds to pay for that
Yeah.
food?
It's tough.
Yeah. I don't know if that
But
answered your question.
you've been extremely innovative though, I think, over the years in and how you've pivoted, which I know you don't like that word, but it's
It's what everybody did, and then it's what everybody
yes.
said.
I know it's one of those words. Yeah, I had that conversation with someone recently, completely different world. But so tell me about some of the programs that you offer right now that Berkshire Grown offers.
Yeah. So setting the food access programs aside, of which we have the mobile farmers market, the farm to food access, and share the bounty. If we set those aside, we do a lot of uh, work with our business members who are primarily farmers. Some do uh, food production at a different level, bakeries or um, mostly bakeries, I guess. We offer workshops, which can
Yep.
be everything from ergonomic prep on a daily basis for getting out in the field and working, to QuickBooks for farmers, to I'm trying to think. We have one coming up in the spring on tractor maintenance. We have one on chainsaw work. That sort of that really down and dirty work, as well as planning your farm, as well as running your farm. We have a 2-part grant writing workshop for farmers, trying to say, okay, like, how do you read that grant application? What are they looking for? What are they funding? First of all, are you the right person? What are they looking for in these questions? Helping people come up with sort of boilerplate answers. It seems really straightforward if you're a writer, but if you're a
But it's
farmer who
not.
doesn't have time, we're really trying to just give them those skills. We also have, and I also want to say, so we have these workshops that are funded through the state, Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, and
Okay.
federal government. USDA has a program called, the acronym is BFRDP, which means Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. Both of those programs really help us bring in consultants, experts, farmers to work with our local farmers. BFRDP, the program we have there, helps pay for workshops. It also pays for one-to-one technical assistance. You could call it mentoring, you could call it consulting, but it's For us, it's very targeted. So, trying to think of a good example. Somebody was starting a farm last year and really just kind of didn't know how to make a business plan and was directed to us and Alyssa, who um, runs our farmer business member program, connected them to somebody who helped them just develop their farming plan, how they're going to do this. We have another farmer who has been around for a couple of years, but she's really learning to farm on some level on a consistent scale and needed to just think about succession planning, not financial, but literally in the field. Okay, crop planning. So connected her with another farmer. We have an unusual relationship right now with somebody who manages at a local nonprofit, manages a composting program and has really grown that. And there's a prison in Pittsfield that has, I can never remember if it's aquaponics or hydroponics. I'll have to look it up.
Oh, great.
But they are, they're growing lettuce and it's fed by fish, et cetera. And they wanted to start a composting program. So I connected them with this local compost expert and he's working with them. So those kind of technical assistance, one-to-one technical assistance, and that's paid for through this BFRDP grant. That same grant helps us pull together networking events, whether it's small on farm, 15 people come and have a tour and then socialize, or larger events, depends year to year. So there's that kind of farmer support that's educational, it's a networking, it can help, it's skill building. It can help move them forward, just notch them up one level that helps them
Absolutely
keep their businesses and their spirit strong. Then we run our own winter farmers markets from November through April. We run 8. 6 of them are here in Great Barrington in the village of Housatonic, and 2 are up in North Adams in November and December. And those are great. They're really fun. The November and December markets in both spaces are very holiday oriented. They're each of them are the weekend before the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. And they started out, I'm trying to remember the year they started. I'll have to get back to you on that. But they started out as just a way to have some winter income for farmers. And they've really become such a part of many farms' business plans that, they'll plant for these markets. They'll grow through the winter. It's not very many crafters. It's pretty much food vendors in all of them. So then the holiday markets really are jam-packed and have that spirit, but they've also really, and this is not to detract from how important and how much fun the summer markets are, but the winter markets are really a community event. Like people come and just hang around and talk and like gets them out of the house. They get to go see their friends. And I hear every single market, several times from many people, this is like a community meeting space. This is an event where I get to come and, see my friends. Yeah. And a lot of their friends are farmers. So that makes me feel really good to run those markets.
I did a winter CSA with a farm that had greenhouses, and they were looking at, they didn't have the skills to do the physical CSA and the logistics of it. And so I connected them with Stony Brook, and they sold out like 100.
Yeah.
It was just like people just, we managed expectations about what they were going to get. It's a very green, a lot of greens, but
yeah, a lot of greens, a lot of potatoes and onions.
But you know what? To get that fresh,
yeah,
people absolutely loved it. It was and I loved it too, because it is a time of year when, you miss that stuff greatly. And
it's so fresh when you get it at the market.
Yes.
It lasts for weeks. By the time you get what you're going to get, you can go to the grocery store and buy a local kale, but by the time it gets to the grocery store, even if it was purchased from a farm down the road, it's not as fresh as what you're going to get at a market that lasts forever. No, it's true. Yeah, so we do that. And then we did just circle back to part of our food access work, which is also just getting food out into the community, and also a partnership. We're one of 5 nonprofits that got a USDA grant for the mobile farmers market. So we're in the beginning of the 3rd and final season for that grant, hopefully not for the markets altogether. And that really started with a needs assessment from, I'm trying to remember the year. I heard about it in 2019. I think the needs assessment at the time had been done in 2018 in the Berkshires. And the biggest obstacle for people getting local healthy food was transportation. So there are, and if you have a friend in Peru, you know that there are a lot of people up there who don't have an easy way into the grocery store. A lot of those hill towns don't have, well, there are no farmers markets up there. Food pantries are smaller, fewer, far between. So that grant was as much about access as low income. So low access to food. And so we tried to pick sites that, even if they were in the heart of Pittsfield, people couldn't, if you don't have a car, that means you either have to take a cab or a bus. But the bus system here, you can't take more than 2 bags on a bus. So what is that? That's very limiting. So we tried to go into the neighborhoods where people really needed to be able to walk from home to the market. And that's been really successful. Every year we kind of tweak the sites a little bit.
How does it work? How does, what kind of vehicle are you going out in? Are you dealing with a certain farm that's supplying for those? How do you work that program?
Yeah, both very good questions. So that grant is a USDA grant, and they will only pay for leases on vehicles. So we leased, actually, through 2 other nonprofits, we leased their vehicles. One of them is an all-electric refrigerated delivery van, which is a beautiful vehicle and easy to drive and works great. But it turns out in a place like the Berkshires, it's not very effective. Only in the sense it's better every year, but like that first year, the places that we could find that did a fast charge were there.
That's
weren't
what I
very
was
many.
thinking, access to that.
Yeah, so if you drive from Great Barrington up to North Adams and back in a day, yeah, you can do that on what it charges. But if the next morning you also then have to turn around and drive to Beckett and back, you can't do both of those trips without having a full charge. And the first year, finding a place to get that full charge was a challenge, and we did find a place. And this year was a lot. It's amazing. It's a lot easier each time. But lesson learned, like if we continue that, it would be with a hybrid vehicle at least, not a fully electric vehicle. But it was nice. It was a nice partnership with that group. So that's the vehicle, and it's just we would show up with tents and tables, as opposed to a vehicle that the sides open up and everything is there.
Right.
That was initially, I think, what we thought we were going to get, but it's not practical for what we need. So Berkshire Grown owns a walk-in cooler. So it's 44 feet long by 16 feet wide. I always forget the dimensions. And we sectioned off a 10-foot part at one end. So you can walk in from either end. And one end is a small freezer section. And then the other is all produce. And we have some aggregation space at the front. Then we ended up, when we got this farm to food access grant, we thought, we're going to be delivering a lot more meat, because meat's expensive. Protein is expensive. But suddenly we had funds that were going to allow that. So we bought a second, smaller walk-in freezer that's probably 20 by 12 feet. And we rent out space in there also to local livestock farmers, because a lot of farmers don't have enough space to store everything. Um, we we bought that walk-in 2021, maybe, and we bought it used, and it served us really well, but it was beginning to show its age. And there was a grant that came up through the state this year that we applied for and got. So we've now gotten rid of the old walk-in. We're borrowing some space from another org in the meantime for about 2 months. Its construction is happening right now for a new walk-in, which is super exciting. But that's key to all of this process.
Yeah.
What was the other question you asked? Oh, so the other thing that we did, that one of the things that was really important for us in the mobile farmers market is to really create a stigma-free shopping environment. So we wanted to have basically a sliding scale that went from paying full retail price to taking the food free as a food pantry. So it doubles as a market and a mobile food pantry.
Okay.
And that has, getting the language around that was tricky, and the graphics, all of that took a lot of people in a room, a lot of time to try and figure that out. I think it's a complicated thing to explain to people. We also take SNAP and HIP. HIP is a statewide program in Massachusetts, what I can talk about in a minute. But it's kind of unfair, but to get food at either a subsidized cost through SNAP or free at a pantry isn't always easy. You really have to explain to people. So a sliding scale, you really have to explain how that works.
Yeah.
And what we wanted was to not have a lot of separation of the people who were going to get their food for free, or the people who were going to use SNAP, or the people who were going to pay full. I wanted people to all go up to the checkout and just point on an iPad, I'm going to pay at this level. Nobody else needed to know. And the way I know it worked is the first year when we got the numbers in, 67%, I think, of the food went out free. At first, it gave me a heart attack. I'm like, oh my God, we can't afford this. And I thought, no, wait, this is what we fundraised for. And this was our goal, to make it a place where people felt comfortable to come and shop and be part of their community. Their community is all coming here. So now our goal for beyond the life of the grant is to figure out a way to support that more with the full retail level. Does it mean we have a couple sites that are much more high end that are underwriting that? I don't know what it means, but we called it our fair share payment plan. And I think it's worked, but it's tricky.
Very tricky, but I commend you for doing what you did and how you executed that. That's pretty good, because I remember we used to accept. We had New York has I can't think of the name of the program, but we used to accept that, and it was a process just to get into that, and then to explain it to people. And I always used to feel awful about just that communication that needed to happen with customers.
Yeah.
About how to explain how to use it and what it can be used on and what it can't be used on. And then it got into this whole dialogue that is hard when, you have other, I don't know. It's too much communication out in the open. It's like, I felt bad, because I would be like, here, just to, take it, because I felt bad, I didn't want this to be such a big deal over, I don't know. So it was tough, but, I'm sure it's evolved since I was involved in it, but it was just, even for the farmer, it was a process. It was a whole reconciliation process. It was this very
so that's
tedious.
What I didn't answer to your question is we're more like, if you go to a farmer's market and there's 20 different vendors that you choose from, what we do is we'll buy from 20 different vendors, maybe not all at one market, but we will buy from various vendors over the course of the season. I think we buy from 40 different farms, and it all gets aggregated. So we might buy onions from 4 different farmers, but they all go in the same basket. So we are with our partners, um, the purchaser, the aggregator, and the distributor into a single market. And we try, I don't know, staffing is always hard and like getting all that stuff out there. There's a line when we now, it takes a while to get the word out, but by the middle of the season, the market van would show up and there'd be a line ready and waiting for them, which is amazing. But, if you're trying to set up the market and get all this stuff going, it's also a little intimidating. I think that the staff felt good about that. They didn't feel pressured. They were
Yeah.
proud that they were bringing that food to people, whether they're paying or getting it as a pantry.
How many do you have now?
So the first year we ran a pilot of 3 locations around the county. This second year we had 6 locations around the county. And next year, I think we will also do 6 locations, but we're going to go to a couple, we're going to shift it up. It's not exactly, we haven't decided exactly, but I think we're going to try 2 new locations.
Great.
We'll see. One of them, I think, experimenting with that idea of attracting some higher end shoppers who can help underwrite the free food. We're looking at different opportunities for that we could go to a spot that would both still bring in people who have access issues and yet attract higher income shoppers. So trying to test out that market literally for the future.
Okay. Excellent.
A 3-year grant seems like a really long time.
It
And
isn't.
then you're in it and you're like, God, I need 2 more years to really get this nailed down.
It's funny, when you think about your skill set, that grant writing skill set has definitely come in handy
Yeah.
in your career. Are we still doing any photography?
No, I do have a dark room at home. It's way more personal information than you need. Yes, I did for a long, long time, even before, since 2010, I sent out a monthly calendar to a mailing list of friends and family and people who, collected my work. And I guess it was about a year ago, I realized in like November that I had never even sent the October calendar. And I was like, oh, time to stop. I'm not paying attention to this. But I do kind of miss that. Literally kept my head and my eyes in the game.
Absolutely.
So I'm trying to make a commitment to myself to not just photographing with my iPhone, but like going out with my actual camera or carrying. I have so many cameras, but, like carrying a relatively good point and shoot with me so that I can take those photos. But it's really, really hard to I think it's really impossible to do a good job and have your head fully in
I know.
one job. As a visual artist, if you're really doing it, you are in it and you're like not just looking, but you're feeling what's going on. And you can't do that if you're also supposed to be talking to shoppers or writing a grant or, running an organization. I don't have that kind of brain, and I don't know many people who do. So the short answer is I will get back to it.
Good. Well, that's good. As long as the intention's there.
Yeah.
So what is the vision? Okay, so what excites you about the coming years with this organization? Like do you have any new projects that you'd like to take on? Any new grants that you want to write?
Yeah.
I
Good
figured you're always out there really thinking about that.
Well, we are, that's a question that nobody can answer right now because you never know with grants what's going to happen. You do your best, you look around, and with the coming administration, there's a huge question. Nobody knows what the USDA in particular is going to look like. They are such an amazing source of funding, both directly to nonprofits, and then a lot of that money will go down to the states, and then the states can administer grants. And that's a big question. Like, are we going to really depend on individual donors and small foundations? That's a huge lift, and I think an unrealistic lift. At the same time, I do, and I've believed this for a long time, I think that strengthening regional food systems is the answer. And I hate to turn to the pandemic again and say, look at the supply chain issues that came up, but look at the supply chain issues. And I think in the Berkshires in particular, we really, yes, our farmers were affected by that. The cost of feed, everything went up, but we actually had a pretty solid foundation for sourcing local food here.
Right.
Like, we were able to pivot and get that food both out to commercial customers and food access customers. And that wasn't just Berkshire Grown. Across the state of Massachusetts, people really were creative and did that. Farmers did a lot more CSAs. They did a lot last mile, door-to-door delivery. A lot of farm stands opened up. And those things, particularly the farm stands, have really continued to thrive.
Yep.
So looking forward to that, I think for Berkshire Grown and other organizations, but I would really like to see us in some ways kind of remember our role as promoting local farms and food and get that conversation up in front of people again. Why is it important to buy from your local farms? Yes, it's more expensive, but those hidden costs that go away if you buy the $2 eggs, they're subsidized by the federal government and come from Indiana, wherever. There are so many costs in there in terms of carbon footprint and not supporting a local economy that people don't think about, which you can understand. They're thinking about their
and sometimes don't know about
family budget. Yeah, but it is, to the extent that you can, buying locally is important, more important now more than ever, because I really think that supporting and building a resilient local food system will be a huge priority for us and our partner organizations. I think we're going to have to be really creative about it, but I do think that getting that conversation out in front of everyone, and just like, once again, remember how, like, if you are making that choice in the grocery store, think about, can I afford to grab the local eggs? If you're thinking about on a Saturday morning, I have to go to the grocery store and I have to buy all these different things. How about you go to the farmer's market and buy it from the farmers directly? Because that money goes all right into the pocket of the farmers. And that's, farmland preservation is important, but it's not going to help if there's no farmers there.
Right.
And farmers can't farm if there's no land. So it's very interconnected. The other thing, so hand in hand, yes, that's the consumer side of promoting it. I'm really interested in learning a lot more about the advocacy side. So I can't lobby. We are not a lobbying organization, but I can advocate. So really, how do I advocate up for state and federal policies that support regional food systems? How do I advocate for policies that support healthy soils? How do I advocate for policies that support, in Massachusetts, we have what's called HIP, the Healthy Incentives Program, that rides on the back of SNAP. And if you want complicated, I can give it to you with this. But basically, you can only use HIP at a farmer's market. You can only use it on produce. But if you have $20 on your EBT SNAP card, you go to a farmer who accepts HIP or the market manager table, and you can spend $20. It goes off your card and right back on again. The farmer gets that money, they get that money through the state, and the shopper gets $20 of food in addition to whatever they had on their SNAP card. It's an amazing program, but those funds just got cut in half. And it's not because people are trying to, narrow the opportunities for people who really need that food. It's just they felt like that was a budget priority. So now we're advocating, along with hundreds of other organizations, to get that money reinstated into the state budget. That level of advocacy, so those cuts don't happen. So people are informed in advance. So local shoppers really understand uh, what a wraparound food system means, where everybody gets the food they need. Those are the things I think going forward that Berkshire Grown kind of can return to, but take to a different level.
So if I'm a farmer and I want to come there, I mean, so I know that, you have a good number of farmers. Do you feel there are certain needs that are not being met from the farming community? From what you see, I mean, I know there's vegetables and maple syrup and there's things, but is there anything that you've come across where you're like, yeah, there's huge gaps here when it comes to produce or whatever?
That's an interesting question, particularly in the Berkshires, which has a very specific geography. We're not like the Hudson Valley or the Pioneer Valley. We don't have a lot of open, flat farmland. We have some, but not a lot. And so a lot of the farmland in the Berkshires it lends itself much more to livestock. So having said that, I think, there are crops that I find really interesting. Like there's a farmer in the Hudson Valley who's growing rice, which, that's a staple. Like that's a good thing. It's a gap though. We don't have that capacity here. We don't have much of that land. There aren't many potato farmers, large scale potato farmers in the Berkshires, another staple. So when we buy for our food access programs, when we buy a lot of potatoes, we'll buy from local Berkshire farmers, but we do have to go to other farmers who are, 5 minutes across the border into New York, Hudson Valley. Yeah. They're still, by federal standards, they're so well within the local circle.
Right.
But
right there, yeah.
When we're using Massachusetts state funds, I really think, okay, I'd like to keep this money within the state.
Right.
But sometimes that's hard to do. Just because of the nature of the farmland that we have. So those kinds of gaps, but that also can present you with like interesting opportunities. Oh, okay, so I can't use rice. What can I use instead? It's funny. Of course I still drink coffee and I love my clementines and can probably not live without avocados. I hate to say, just like every other millennium person, but I sometimes am surprised at how effortlessly I have, and my husband really is probably more responsible for this since he does most of the meal planning and shopping and cooking. We do plan our meals seasonally. What's available now? What's grown around here? But we do eat differently. We do eat more about what's grown in our community. And that really came home to me over Thanksgiving when we were eating local turkey, local kale, local potatoes, local cranberries, local cheese. Well, we didn't use local rice because we couldn't get the kind we needed. But, what wasn't local? I'm sure there was stuff that wasn't local, but, it was pretty, even like the cider that we served, in the pre-meal appetizers was a local hard cider that like I looked around, I'm like, oh, wow, we didn't even think about this. It's just become part of the way we plan our meals and allocate our budget.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like the Berkshires was a good move.
Yeah. No, we love it here. We love it.
I'm happy to see that. That's awesome. And the hiking is great around there too. And I love the fact that you're right along the Appalachian Trail.
I know there's so many hikes that you can take where it says, oh, the AT comes through here. It loops through the trail for 10 minutes.
I think that's great. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope to connect with you in person.
Yeah, contact me if you come back through. That would be fun.
I definitely want to. I would love to. I really would. So I'm definitely going to do that. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from. whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. As we are learning from many of our farmers and entrepreneurs, strong connections help propel our visions. Through my interview with Lisa Chase from the University of Vermont Extension and Vermont Tourism Research Center, I was connected to an exciting and new organization called the Global Agritourism Network, or GAN for short. The Global Network is made up of agritourism stakeholders from around the world. They include farmers and ranchers, researchers, educators, community planners, policymakers, agricultural service providers, and tour operators, among others. It is currently free to join, so if you have any interest in agritourism, check them out at agritourism.eurac.edu/GAN, or just Google Global Agritourism Network. The link will be in our show notes as well. You never know, this global network may help you take your agritourism vision to the next level.